Hi there, my friends. Welcome again to Indian Story Read Along. Today's story is going to be from the Panchatantra set of stories. For those of you who don't know, Panchatantra is a gathering of ancient stories from ancient times when there were kings, queens, um, there were sages, there was magic, there were animals talking, there's all kinds of stuff that you really only hear about in legends. And so all of these stories have a moral attached to them. And there are stories about people doing things wisely and people doing things stupidly. And it's all of it is to teach children about how to behave, how to think clearly, critical thinking. And this is how we illustrated this when there wasn't really a chance to go to school hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, or thousands of years ago, actually, when these stories were put together. So today's story is called The Mongoose and the Brahman's Wife. A mongoose is a kind of rodent type creature, kind of like a weasel in the weasel family. And they are very particular to South India and Africa and very warm areas. They're not like gophers and prairie dogs and stuff that we have in North America and Europe. So this is the mongoose and the Brahman's wife. Brahmins back then were very poor. They were educated. They had very, very simple means of making money. Sometimes they got lucky and they worked for a king. Most of the times they would just kind of teach people to read. And so that's what the situation is here for this Brahmin, okay? He is not in IT like a lot of Brahmins, a lot of my people are now. The mongoose and the Brahmin's wife. A kind Brahmin once found a baby mongoose whining near its dead mother. Oh. And this shows that this guy is very compassionate. He sees this and then he can't just leave it. And he says, "You poor thing, I'll take you home with me." And he goes home to his wife, and you can see that she is dressed in a village style clothing. It's not like she has a nice cut blouse piece under there. It's just a very basic thing there. So she has a newborn baby. So then Brahmin comes home and he says, "My dear, you'll have to bring up this little baby too." And then she's like, "Why not? I love little ones. Bring him here." The wee helpless mongoose soon grew into a plump, strong creature with sharp teeth. So you see that the newborn baby, along with the mongoose, are both growing together. And it looks like they love each other. It's just like a baby and a dog. But there are doubts in the mother's mind, and she's trying to be very careful. So they're playing on the ground, and mommy picks up the baby and takes him away from his friend. And then she's like, "Well, much as I love him, he is, after all, a wild animal. And wild animals sometimes have wild instincts, and you can't really control it depending on how they've been raised." So this is the question of nature versus nurture, whether the way someone or something, an animal, is born will determine what they do, or whether how they're raised will determine what they do. But either way, she wants to be careful. So she says, "I'll have to be careful." She takes the baby, puts him in his unjal, that swing over there, and the mongoose is on the floor. So then she says to the Brahmin who is sitting there and studying his texts, she takes the pot and she says, "I'm off to the river. See that the mongoose does not hurt our son." So this really is ancient times. She is going to get water from the river. And this is something that women had to do every single day, or somebody from the family, usually women, had to do every single day. So she's doubtful of the mongoose. She says to her husband, "See, the mongoose does not hurt our son." Husband is kind of like, "Well, how can he hurt his own brother? You worry unnecessarily." So you see that the mother is thinking that that mongoose's nature is going to take over, and the Brahmin is like, "No, it's nurture. He was raised with us. He wouldn't hurt that baby." A little later, Brahman says, thinks it's time to go begging for alms. I better leave. So this is so far back that Brahmins had no source of income. As I said before, they might get lucky and they might have a job with the king or something, or teach the king's son how to, I don't know, give him his education. I'm not sure. But most Brahmins back then, they did not know where their next meal was coming from. And they would go and beg from door to door for bhiksham. They would say bhiksham dehe. And that meant that please give me rice, grains, anything that you have to spare so that I may have a meal. And that's how they got their food. So then, I have to say this is extremely irresponsible. Like, come on. This world's worst dad, right? Right here. For one, if someone came to my husband came to me and said, look, you know, you have to raise this wild animal along with the baby, I'd be like, yeah, no. Secondly, he leaves the baby in the crib. Even if the mongoose was not there, you cannot leave a baby alone. This guy just walks off. So I don't think the mom is really the bad guy for whatever happens here. So the Brahmin left, and this is what happened over here. So even if the mongoose wasn't there, this still would have happened. A snake comes in through a hole in the house on the other side. And it turns out, when you think about it from the mongoose's perspective, it turns out that the Brahmin was right. The mongoose was more influenced by nurture, and that means that he was more influenced by the way he was raised instead of being a wild animal. He thinks a snake. He's out to get my brother. So he has love for that child, and he sees himself as being a full brother to this child. He doesn't see the difference between their species. And so then he fights with the snake, this cobra. No, you don't. Not when I'm around. So some of us, in Panchatantra stories, in lots of stories, it is shown many times that mongooses and snakes are natural enemies. So the mongoose wins this round, he kills this snake. And then he's happy about it. There! I finished him. I must let mother know that my brother is safe. And he's extremely happy. Mother comes back from getting water, and Mongoose is thinking, there she is. How proud she'll be when she learns of my bravery. But then, you know that the mother is already worried about this mongoose hurting her baby, and then when she sees blood, you brute, you've killed my son, she jumps to that conclusion. And it would be hard to not jump to this conclusion. So then she is so angry, she throws a heavy, heavy pot of water right on the mongoose's head. Take that, you ungrateful beast. My poor baby, why did I ever agree to? Then she sees it. A snake. The mongoose. Blood. No. And she realizes what had happened. Oh no, what have I done? Why did I jump to conclusions when I saw the blood on his nose? And so the moral of the story is, act in haste, repent at leisure. This moral is correct. You cannot jump to conclusions. But that was a pretty good conclusion. Like, come on, 99% of people might have jumped to that. Especially when she left the house, her husband was there, and then Dum Dum just decides to leave. The baby, a wild animal, and the door is open, and come on. I mean, this is a good moral, but I personally disagree with how they got to the moral, with how the story, they kind of like, this lady can only do so much, come on. But at the end of the day, do not bring wild animals home, and do not leave your baby alone with the door open. There are lots of Panchatantra tales like this, and I'm kind of making fun of it. I'm not really, though. These are very, very important pearls of wisdom in our ancient history. But they don't completely make sense nowadays when you think of how much everything has changed. And when you think also about different aspects to it. And I like it a lot when my kids ask questions about this. They would have been like, oh, why is the dad leaving the baby alone? Right? Because dads aren't supposed to do that. But there are lots of other Panchatantra stories like this, and a lot of them are spot on even today, even with all the thousands of years that have passed since they've been written. So if you like stories like this, please do subscribe to this channel and join us again next time for more stories.